keeps prices down far more effectively.
As long as suffering of sentient being remain, I will remain in order to serve.
I imagined God like my grandfather.
Good evening and welcome to In Conversation. Tonight my guest is Professor Samuel P. Huntington, perhaps the most celebrated and controversial political cartographer of our times. He's a professor at Harvard University whose seminal works, The Clash of Civilizations and The Remaking of the World Order, are only the most recent in a long line of influential works that have included more than 12 books and 90 scholarly articles. His is a decisive voice in shaping American foreign policy. Professor Huntington, what is the clash of civilizations?
Well, the clash of civilizations is a phrase I created to describe what seems to me to be a central feature of the post-Cold War world as far as international politics is concerned. During the Cold War, countries were grouped into three major blocks: the free world, led by the United States, the communist bloc, led by the Soviet Union, and then the third world of non-aligned nations, including obviously India as a prominent member, where a lot of the struggle during the Cold War took place. Well, those three blocks have passed into history, and so the question is, what will be the major groupings of states in the post-Cold War world, and what factors will shape the relations among states?
I think the book suggests, and the ideas you have propounded suggests a moving away from popular perceptions, that it is sort of economic imperatives that might determine.
Well, that's true. Obviously, economics is important, and economic issues and questions of trade and investment are central to the relations among countries, as are access to resources, important resources like oil. But it seems to me, if one looks at what is happening in the world today, states are realigning themselves along cultural lines, whereas during the Cold War it was a politics and ideology that predominated. Now in the relations among states, now it is culture. And states with similar cultures are coming together. States with different cultures are, in many cases, moving apart, or actually splitting up, as we have seen in the cases of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, which were two states which encompassed the peoples of several different civilizations, and they both broke up.
Yet there is a popular perception in some senses that with the globalization of the media, and shall we say the Americanization of the media, that in some senses that global civilizations and cultures are becoming more homogeneous. So you have, the Chinese civilization is more American in some ways, perhaps, than it was before.
Well, there certainly are those aspects of globalization taking place as a result of the tremendous increase in transportation communications. And obviously, a lot of this involves Americanization because of the extent to which the United States corporations and other entities dominate these facilities for communication and transportation. And obviously, American popular culture is tremendously popular around the world in the movies and consumer goods and Coca-Cola, McDonald's, etc. But in many respects, it seems to me that much of this is relatively superficial, and people can adapt the global American culture, but underneath they still, with the other half of their lives, they still maintain their traditional practices, beliefs, ways of life of their particular civilization. And I think it's very important to draw a distinction between westernization and modernization. because all societies want to modernize and people want to become wealthier and be able to benefit from advanced technology, but they don't necessarily want to become westernized.
You have projected the idea that that the major class of civilizations will be between the United States and China. If you were to sort of indulge in a bit of futurology, what do you think will happen when this clash takes place? Is there going to be a winner, or?
Well, I'm not quite sure what the character of the clash will be. I think if Chinese economic growth continues at anything like the rates which it has for the past couple of decades, clearly China will become more and more assertive in international affairs, and this is quite natural. When countries develop industrially, become economically stronger, they do become more assertive in global politics. This was true of Britain and France, Germany, Japan, the United States, and the Soviet Union, and it's to be expected with China. There is always the problem, however, of the accommodation of a rising power into the existing global system. And many people draw a comparison between the rise of China at the end of this century and the rise of Germany at the end of the last century. And of course, the rise of Germany eventuated in 2 world wars. And what we want to do is to avoid that with the rise of China and be able to work out arrangements and accommodations. This puts a particular problem before the United States because the Chinese have indicated that they expect to resume their hegemonic position in East Asia, a position which they had for centuries down until the middle of the 19th century. And the United States has always opposed the domination of either Western Europe or East Asia by another power. And indeed, we fought 2 world wars and a Cold War in this century to prevent that from happening. And so it seems to me the crucial relationship in the coming years is between China and the United States and trying to work out some form of accommodation.
You're described as a distinguished political cartographer. What is the map that you see of the different groupings that are now emerging?
Well, I think the major groupings that are likely to replace the 3 blocks of the Cold War are the world's principal civilizations: Western civilization, Islamic civilization, Cynic or Confucian civilization, Indian civilization, Orthodox civilization, Japanese, Latin American, African. It seems to me these are the natural groupings of states in global politics now.
You have confronted, shall we say, experienced some controversy over your pointing to the processes that Islam is going through and as being a source, or shall we say, a center of significant conflict in the globe.
Well, I think that's the case. Clearly, the Muslim world is in the midst of a tremendous Islamic resurgence, and Muslim societies are becoming more Islamic and Islamist in their behavior, beliefs, way of life. And this is a great cultural revival or renewal. Some people have compared it to the Protestant Reformation in Europe several hundred years ago, which also was an effort to renew Christianity in Europe and to purge Christianity of corruption and other things that had happened in the Catholic Church at that time. I think one has to view this Islamic resurgence as an effort in many respects at purification. Now, of course, it does have an extremist element that turns to violence, and this is exacerbated by the fact that in recent decades, Muslim societies have had very high birth rates, and this has led to the creation of a big youth bulge in Muslim societies of people between the ages of 15 and 25. And history shows that when that age grouping amounts to more than 20% of the people in a society, that then there is a great likelihood of instability, violence, upheavals, revolutions, and so forth. And this is, I think we can see, is occurring in Muslim societies, and that there is a very high level of social violence of Muslims against Muslims and Muslims against non-Muslims.
Do you see that with diasporas, in a sense, crossing national boundaries, that the notion of the clash of civilizations, which is really based on looking at the historic evolution of how different cultures and societies have arrived at new balances of power and influence, how is this going to impact? The United States has a very large Chinese diaspora.
Sure.
What?
Well, I think one of the fascinating consequences of the recent improvements in transportation and communication is that it makes it possible for people who are in a diaspora to maintain much closer contact with the culture of their home country. Now, we see this in the United States in the large numbers of immigrants, recent immigrants we have from Latin America, who now can keep in very close touch with their homes and villages and towns in Mexico and elsewhere in Latin America. And this raises questions in people's minds as to what extent will they really become Americanized. And in Germany, 80% of the Turks who are in Germany watch Turkish TV. And obviously they can maintain close contacts with Turkey. You can fly back and forth very quickly and easily, and they are remaining in large part of involved in the Turkish world. And this upsets the Germans and causes great problems for the Germans. They don't know how to react to it.
As these processes of, shall we say, integration in some ways intensify, and you were to look ahead 20, 40, 50, 100 years, do you see that the nature of the clash of civilizations, which for the present seems to sort of coincide with the clash of nationalities and nations, will somehow change? What you see as future, long-term sources of conflict?
Well, I think it's very hard to look into the future, and this emerging pattern of world politics dominated by cultural and civilizational factors may not last very long. For 40 years or so, world politics was shaped in the Cold War framework. Now it seems to me to be taking this civilizational pattern, but quite possibly the developments could occur at some point in 2030 or something, which will bring a new pattern to world politics. Quite possibly economic issues could come back and be of central importance.
Do you have a vision, a dream of a peaceful world, and what might be the elements that will bring this about?
Yes. The people often accuse me of setting forth a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that talking about the clash of civilizations is more likely to make it happen. But it seems to me it all depends how people react to it. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, lots of very serious people thought that a nuclear war between the United States and the Soviet Union was virtually inevitable. That didn't happen because people became concerned about it. And I hope that people become concerned about the possibility of a clash of civilizations and will take measures to reduce that probability. And I think if we are going to have peace in the world, it'll have to be organized on a civilizational basis with the core states of civilizations, countries like the United States, Russia, China, Japan, India, others, playing the leading role in maintaining peace within their area and then negotiating with the core states of other civilizations to try to prevent or end conflicts between groups from the different civilizations. And one of the problems with the Islamic world, of course, is that there is no major power, dominant power, which is recognized by most of the Muslim peoples as the spokesman for Islam. I think the world would be a much more stable place if there was a leading state in Islam.
In addition to describing India as a core state, you've also described it as a swing state,
right? Yes.
In some ways, in the context of the
right.
new emerging
right.
global order.
Right.
In what senses do you see India as a swing state?
Well, it seems to me quite obviously the West is and will remain the dominant, most influential civilization for years to come. It is facing in different ways challenges from China and from the Muslim world, and hence it seems to me that Russia, Japan, and India, the three other major powers, are in a sense swing states. They will how they align themselves will greatly influence how these interactions between the West and what I call the challenger civilizations, Islam and China, work out. And quite obviously, China is attempting to build, if not an anti-Western coalition of countries, certainly a non-Western coalition of countries in order to counter the Western power and the intrusions of the West into non-Western societies and Western dominance of the global institutions. And that's perfectly natural. And it seems to me a country like India is faced with choices as to whether it wants to simply remain outside of this global politics, the interaction of the major powers, or whether it would want to align with China in a non-Western or anti-Western coalition, or whether it would want to cooperate more fully with the West. I will argue, quite frankly, that it seems to me that it's the third course of action which would be most in India's interest, to develop further its relations with the West and particularly with the United States.
Would you say that India should sort of ally with the Western world and the United States because they might emerge winners in this clash?
Well, I think it's hard to say whether anyone will emerge a winner or a loser as far as that goes. It may be the results of the interaction may be totally inconclusive. It does seem to me that India would benefit from cooperating with the United States and other Western countries. The United States is already the principal foreign investor in India and India's major trade partner. And I think it would be highly desirable to expand these economic relationships and also to introduce a greater degree of cooperation on political and strategic matters. And that, it seems to me, would be in the interests of India and also in the interests of the United States.
Do you think it is possible, or that it might happen one day in the vocabulary of international politics, that we could transcend the idea of conflict or clashes between civilizations and reach a state of, well, not even accommodation, because accommodation has an element of yielding,
of harmony.
Of harmony, yes.
Well, I think that gets back to the basic question of what is human nature. And one doesn't have to go up to the level of clashes of civilizations to see that there is something, it seems to me, in human nature that first of all makes people differentiate themselves from others and often emphasize the differences. This is the way we define ourselves, is by process of differentiation. And then this process of differentiation leads to competition. If I am different from you, well, I also want to be better than you, and you want to be better than me. And this leads to competition at the individual level, between business corporations, between political parties, so forth. And it seems to me at the level of international relations and civilizations, a degree of competition is inherent in that situation. And the problem is to ensure that the competition doesn't become violent.
How seriously do you think that the new age and the new consciousness movements, you see so many cover stories in Time,
Yes.
Newsweek, and what have you, of the number of people in the United States now going to church, of the impact of Indian gurus in the United States?
Well, I think, let me make 2 points. First of all, the American people are very religious people. And if one can believe public opinion polls, well over 50% go to church every week. 95% say they believe in God. The United States is, I think, probably the only country in the world that has on every piece of its currency the words, "In God we trust." Nonetheless, insofar as the United States is religious, it is a Christian country. 85% or more of Americans identify themselves as Christians. There are movements of other religions, including Hinduism and Buddhism. The latest polls show, however, that less than 0.5% of the American people believe in Hinduism and in Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. You also articulated the idea of the relationship between democracy and development.
Yes.
That the more
Yes.
development you have, that will inevitably lead to an affirmation of democracy. And China, in some ways, is central to your concerns about what happens
right.
in the next millennium, or the early part of the next millennium. What do you see happening in China with the growth of economic development?
Well, that's a central question. You said that development inevitably leads to democracy. I don't think anything is inevitable, but it's very likely to lead to democracy. And as countries become more economically developed and expand the size of their middle class and become better educated, there is naturally a demand for greater participation in government. And we have seen that very dramatically in East Asia. In South Korea and in Taiwan. We went through a process of economic development and have now become democracies. I might just say also, of course, that India is the great exception to this rule, and that it became a democracy when it was still very poor. Now, with respect to China, one would assume that as China develops economically and as you have more and more capitalists and businessmen and a larger middle class, there will be pressures for movement away from the current political system. Now, whether this leads to something like Western democracy, I think is uncertain. It could, but it might lead to something else, a different sort of democracy. People often forget that one country which has many of the accoutrements of a democracy is Iran, which has highly competitive elections for both its parliament, which is quite an important body, and as we saw this past year, for its president, where the non-establishment, in effect the opposition candidate, won with 70% of the vote. This certainly doesn't make Iran a democracy in the Western sense.
Yeah, you have drawn a distinction between liberal and,
That's right.
and electoral
That's
democracy.
That's right. This is, you're right. Mm-hmm. And Iran is clearly, in some respects, qualifies as an electoral democracy, but certainly not as a Western liberal democracy. And the other interesting question, of course, is even if China does become more democratic in some sense, what effects will that have on its international role? And there is a widespread assumption that a more democratic country will be more peacefully inclined and will be more friendly to the West. That may happen, but I don't think it's necessary, because as we have seen in many cases, democracy can provide an opportunity for ambitious politicians to exploit nationalist sentiments, to appeal to ethnic prejudices, to try to arouse people against a foreign enemy. I'm not saying this necessarily would happen with democratization in China, but it's possible.
You know, China has, through its history, seen sudden and cataclysmic changes. Do you think that we're now at a time in its history where change may not be as sudden and as cataclysmic?
Well, I guess surprises can't be predicted. If they could be, they wouldn't be surprises. And so all sorts of surprising things can happen. And I wouldn't want to say they wouldn't happen in China.
Despite the sort of how do I put it, the perils of prediction, and in an age when sequels are commonplace, you've had a very influential, successful book, which really comes at shall I say, at one stage in a process where you've done more than 12 books and 90 scholarly articles. But is there a sequel to The Clash of Civilizations, or beyond The Clash of Civilizations? What might happen?
Well, I don't know whether there'll be a sequel to or not. My institute at Harvard did have a conference this fall which brought together people from all the major civilizations and countries to discuss the different perspectives on international order. And I would hope we may be able to put together a book out of that conference and try to identify to what extent there are elements of agreement in the way in which people from these different cultures look at the international system, and to what extent there are elements of disagreement.
Do you look ahead beyond this cycle of history?
Well, as I said before, I can't. You know, I'm very skeptical about how useful it is to try to look very far into the future. Probably what I've described as the politics of civilizations will describe what is going on in the world for the next couple of decades. I wouldn't want to try to go beyond that.
Professor Huntington, thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you.